What's up, everybody? How we doing? I'm Chuck Pino. I'm a writer, editor, and all around not too bad guy. And this is
I'm Eric
right.
Cockrell. I'm an all right guy as well. I do video production, um, audio drama, and comics, and I've written a book.
Ooh, yes, that's right. And of course, what are we working on right now?
And right now we are working on Essence House, the audiobook radio drama podcast. Me and Chuck are co-creators and co-writers.
But really, this isn't about us today. Though, I mean, there's always a little bit of ego involved. What we want to do, though, is we want to educate people on writing for different mediums. So we would love it if inside on Facebook here, if you guys have any questions or whatnot, please hit us up. Also, we know that a lot of you are writers as well. If you have tips, we would love to hear them. So, Eric, what medium do you want to talk about first?
Well, I guess since we're on our page for our audio book, we could probably start with audio. I mean, we
Okay.
have more experience in comics, so that might make sense too. It's up to you, I guess.
No, let's go with the audio.
Okay. So, when it comes to audio, it's actually very similar. What we're doing is an audio book, so it's very similar to writing a book. There's other considerations that you have to take into account, particularly like with ours, we've inserted sound effects, which if you're not inserting sound effects, then you're telling about the sound effects in your story. So the sound effects I think are a lot of fun for us. But so should we talk through like the way that we write together on it, or?
Yeah, actually, I like that a lot. Yeah, let's do that.
You want to kick that off?
Okay. Oh, cool. That's awesome. Someone just shared it to a bunch of groups. You're awesome. Thank you so much. I was going to type to him, but we're talking to you. So thank you, Kyle. That's freaking awesome. We really appreciate that. So, so I guess part of this is working with a co-writer, working with someone else, which is not something I had really done before. My wife and I had worked together, but we both have very visible, obvious strengths. So when Eric and I came together to write Essence House, that wasn't something necessarily that we were fully aware of. I had edited for him before, but I didn't know he had the other thing I'd edited. It was co-written between himself and Gene Hoyle. So I didn't know who had done what or any of that kind of stuff. So I didn't know necessarily what his strengths were. So I did find right away that we both have very kind of similar writing styles. We're both very kind of dialogue heavy and action heavy and whatnot. And we were able to bounce off each other very quickly. I remember when I got the script for episode 1, right away, I think you had like a 1,000 some odd words. And the thing about it is that I remember Eric had it nailed down. It was really funny. Right away, he was like, okay, this is how many words we need for this many minutes. And he already had it like kind of, the math was done. And I was like, oh, cool. So we were on average, we're like 3,500 words.
Yeah, between 3,000 and 3,500 somewhere.
So he had like 1,000 words of that script already. And he was like, hey man, do you want to check it out and see what you can do? And I grabbed it and I started banging away. And we kind of, for the first, I'd say like 2 or 3 episodes, we kind of did that sort of back and forth. I actually didn't fully start and finish an episode all by myself until I want to say 5.
Yeah, I think after the first handful, we've been more on our own with notes. I mean, I think we've talked out the episodes ahead of time in large part. So it's easier, I guess, to now grab and go than it was at the start.
Yeah, I guess that was part of kind of feeling each other out and how to get it done and how to work with one another. But yeah, I mean, it was really easy. There was a very simple ebb and flow, and then even like I remember I did a chunk of Hey Tracy, how's it going? I did a chunk of episode 1, and then you came in and you finished it, and then we just both kind of jumped in and we did little tweaks and talked through tweaks, and then we were all done and we worked from there. And you actually, the first person to do an episode alone was you. You did 4 by yourself. I mean, and to his credit, he would do the episode. It was all done. And then I was like, hey, Chuck, there you go. And I got to come in and check. And I go, like, let's work on this. And we basically ended up editing each other. And there was no real kind of bickering or any kind of bull crap about it at all. We just, at the end of the day, you're in service to the story. So you got to understand especially when you're working with someone else, your ego doesn't mean anything. You're only one name on that book. And really it's the title. That's the most important thing.
I think a great example of that is actually next week's episode. The ending of that, I had written it, and then you kind of pushed a few things, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'll go straight in and horror this up a bit. Like it was got some good descriptions in there, and got a little more action, and just I pushed it just the right amount. So.
Yeah. And what was great about that episode is that 9 actually came before 8. And I said this last night on the after show we did, but I don't know if that's out there yet. But 9 came before 8. And so when I read 9, I was so blown away by the work that he had done that I was like, oh shit, I got to bring my A game. Like he's really ramping stuff up for this series season finale. I got to do the same. And so 8 and 9 are so good because I feel like we really played off of each other and we really got psyched for the story. Like 9 is something that we had planned from the very beginning and that we slowly worked away and tooled on. And so when Eric got in there, he was so excited and he was like, I got to write 9. Yeah, go ahead. And yeah.
Yeah, that was a great experience. The whole thing's been a great experience. And I think you're right too about I don't really know how you pick a partner for this sort of thing. The co-writing is a big thing. I just know that I liked working with you, and I liked some stuff that you've written, so that helps. But when you said that we had very similar writing styles, it's true because there's times, especially early on, I remember referencing one time that I really liked this thing that you added, Chuck, and then you were like, I didn't add that. And I was like, oh shit, I wrote that. Like I didn't remember doing it because we were so involved in so many episodes at a time. And it was just funny because it could have been written by either one of us.
Well, and that is fun. The funny thing about those first couple episodes is that you just, you don't know because so many people like we went back and forth on those ones so much that I don't know what I wrote and what you did anymore. Like I have no idea. Now, of course, later on, all these other episodes, we pretty much did them alone. We kind of worked in our own little cocoon. And again, that was the fun part. And it's something that we've been able to discuss to our Patreons, to our patrons, but not to the general public. And that is that when you're writing something like this, you need to have an outline, a strong outline, and sort of the pillars. So because we were doing it like a TV series, we had a good idea of, we knew exactly where we were beginning, where we were going to end the season, and where we wanted the arcs to take us through the season.
Yeah.
And so on any given episode, we knew this was the story we had to tell. But it was, it was not completely done. Like we still had lots of room to for creativity and to play with. And I know that both of us have moments that the other one did where it was just like, that was so much fun. I love what you did there. You know what I mean? And I think when you're working with someone else, you also have to really grasp on to the fact that you get to be a fan of your own product now because you get to see what they've written with fresh eyes.
Yep. I agree. I think so like what you just talked about with outlining things, I think that sort of transcends all different mediums. If you're writing a book series, you're going to want to know where this thing's heading because people can tell if you don't, like a great example is the most recent Star Wars trilogy. Like you could tell really quick that they didn't have a plan in place for all.
and as an editor, that bugs the crap out of me. And let's be honest, as a Star Wars fan,
yeah,
I can still, it's kind of like having a bad date. You know what I mean? Like, just give me a little bit of time. Let me get over it, and we can probably be friends again and hang out. But I'm not ready right now.
She was pretty though.
Well, yes, that's true. But yeah, and I mean outlines. That's something when I'm editing. I always demand an outline out of them, especially if we're pre-script. Like, what does your outline look like? Oh, I'm just gonna write it. Nope. Trust me, we're going to. If you know where you're going, we can end some of your mistakes before you even make them. Mm-hmm. So outline, people, it's so important. I know that you just want to get in there and write it, but honestly, if you have a good idea of where you're going to go, it doesn't have to be written stone. You can still play with some, and you might find along the way that you find something that works even better. That's fine. You can always retool, but it will really allow you to skip a bunch of those early mistakes by doing that.
Yeah, Lord knows we went through that with Essence House. Like,
dude,
our episode 10 we had planned from the beginning, but 90% of it was altered along the way. But we got our end. We got to our point that we planned though. Like that's the key.
Yeah, and there it was so neat because there was so many things. I have the walking stick that you did was not planned at all, but then when it came out, it was like, that's perfect. Like that solves so many problems. It's really interesting. If you haven't watched it, I would go check it out. The walking stick is a really cool thing, and that is all Eric. It's so cool. But anyways, more about audio dramas, I guess, in general. Now, we haven't worked on this so much, but of course, in audio dramas, there's also often a cast. Like they'll do multiple voices. We're lucky we just have Mike Goodrich, who is just talented as heck, and he can do voices all by himself. But of course, when you're doing that, I guess you would want to write that more almost like a movie script with directions for a play.
Yeah, and like so the way we're doing it, it's not so much a play. It's an audio book. Luckily, we have somebody talented enough to, go through and give each character their own voice and personality outside of what we've written into it. So that's super helpful. But yeah, like I've listened to on Audible, I've listened to some X-Files audiobooks and stuff. They're pretty cool. They're a little bit weird. I've heard good things about the Wolverine ones. I haven't checked that out yet. But there's
wasn't Scott talking about those?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was enjoying that. So I want to check out the Star Wars Dooku one. There's a Count Dooku audio drama. I want to check that out sometime soon. But yeah, like the cast ones are a little different, and they would be just like writing for television. Although there's more, instead of writing action happening on screen, you'd be writing narration for the action as if it was an audiobook, I guess.
So now that starts to slowly take us towards novels. And kind of the way I'll segue this is that the plan for Essence House is that we're going to, we've introduced them as episodes, as chapters, but there's still a lot of details that aren't necessarily required for a regular, say, 20-minute episode, that when you have a novel, it would be really nice to kind of flesh stuff out.
Yeah.
So especially like, we weren't very heavy on our character descriptions early on and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of physical descriptions and stuff that we would really like to be able to play with, and even to be able to draw out some of the situations that happen, that it's just not important for a tight serial drama. But for a novel, we have that time. So what would you say is the process there?
Yeah, so like one thing there is that sound effects aren't in a novel, and they flesh out a scene a lot. Even we don't do this a lot in Essence House so far, and I don't even know if you noticed, but towards the end of episode 9 next week, there's a cough, that cough is a sound effect from episode 4. It's not really part of the scene that's going on. It's actually another character from another episode. And that would be hard to write into the story without being, it's just a fun Easter egg, kind of in the, so you probably didn't even notice it, did you?
So I noticed the cough last night when we listened to 9. I did not remember that it was from 4. That's like some Boba Fett stuff, where that his one scream as he falls into the pit of Sarlacc is now used everywhere, anytime anyone is screaming in pain at all.
Yeah, it was. So it was. That's something though that would. I might try to find a way to write it into the book when we do the book, but it was really easy to do as an audio drama. And yeah, that was one thing. So when I wrote my Blister book, like the one big thing I had was once I was all done, I was very heavy on dialogue and like the actions that are taking place, but I wasn't great on describing the atmospheres. And so that's something that I think also in Essence House we do a little bit of that, but we allow the sound to take over a lot of that. And so I think that there will be a lot of going back and revamping all of that.
Yeah.
And it gives you a chance to clean up any inconsistencies, things like that. Like, so, I mean, in the way we're doing it, as it'll be more of like the definitive edition of the story, really, at that point.
Yeah. So now I am, as of yet, not a novelist. So as much as I've started some and worked a lot on them, what kind of advice and what kind of process would you say, having written Blister for a novel, what was your process for getting that done and making that happen?
So what's worked for me is when I was writing Blister, I was actually going out to open mic reading nights and stuff at a local venue, and I was reading my stories. So that kind of drove me to keep wanting to move forward on it. Some people will do something similar like that in like a blog format. And it's kind of what ended up driving us on Essence House. Like I can't necessarily sit down and write, 10,000 words at a time. But as I have time, I can write, a few thousand or a couple thousand. And it's helpful with the way that we're doing Essence House to be able to be putting something out regularly and the story's building. So I think that's really helpful. Also just finding a way to be the most comfortable writing. I started writing on paper, but that did not work for me because you have to type it again. It's just a time waster to me. Because I like paper. I'm not anti-paper. I draw on paper, even though I have a digital monitor I can draw on. But when it comes to writing, I just like to get it right to that format. But I like where I differ from you on writing is that I like to write from my phone. I like to write into Google Maps, and I like to have it available anywhere.
And I find that nuts. I want to really sit down and have kind of my stage all set and make it happen like that. I also find, and the best thing that's been good for me with Essence House is I'm really, really good on a deadline. Like, to me, and it's not that I necessarily, but if you tell me this needs to be in Saturday by midnight, you'll get it Saturday by midnight, like 11:59 and 58 seconds. I'll give it to you, and it'll be solid and together and stuff. But I don't even know what it is. I think this is like a high school homework kind of thing. But it's almost like there's an adrenaline rush that you get by going, oh crap, this has to be done, and you just fly through it. But I guess inspiration is certainly a requirement too. Was there anything that you'd say, especially with because you have mostly done comics even before you did Blister, right?
Yeah, like I've been drawing comics since high school, which was a billion years ago now.
You old bastard. So what inspired you to want to make it a novel, and why, and like kind of how did you keep going until that was finished?
Yeah, I think with Blister, initially I wanted to do that one as a web comic or newspaper style comic. It would obviously never be in a newspaper. The language in there is not quite right. But yeah, originally I had written it up as like 52 strips. I wrote like a whole year's worth of strips. Mostly strip ideas, like they weren't completely scripted. And then it evolved over time. I kept trying it. I kept having a lot of false starts, but I was never really digging like what I was doing. And then one day I was like, I just want to get this done. I had a family and stuff, so it was hard to find time to draw at that time. But I could find time to write on my phone. Like I would come home for lunch and I'd be just sitting there on my phone, type it, or even on breaks at work. So that ended up, and then I knew people that were doing the open mic reading scene. So I just jumped into that, and it worked for me. But like initially it was not meant to be a book, but it felt like it could work.
Yeah.
And I think it did.
I'm sad to say I haven't read it yet. I've literally been waiting, and it's one of those things. I don't even know why, but I really want to literally buy it from the person if I know that that's an opportunity. And since I know that we're supposed to be hanging out at some point, I'm like, no, I'm going to buy the book from his hands. Like I want to get it. I want to have it signed. I want to, like there's this whole physical feel to it that just is very strangely satisfying. We have gotten some shout outs, no questions yet. So if you guys do have any questions about mediums, let us know. But Kyron, much love, dude. You're one of our favorites as well. Phil Lockler, how you doing, man? If you guys have any questions about writing for different mediums, we've already discussed audio dramas, and we're now well into talking about novels. Kyron asks, what are some of your favorite novels?
Me, well, my top one is the Chronicles of Amber series by Roger Zelazny. Like, I could go back to that anytime. I love it. Like I've been doing a lot of audiobooks, just while I'm doing other things. And I've started going back through and picking up the audiobooks for that series because I just love it. And then I'm into Chicago history, which has been shown a bit in Essence House. And so Devil in the White City by Erik Larson is one of my favorites. It's a great juxtaposition of building a World's Fair and a serial killer on the loose. So those are a couple of my favorites. I really hate a bad book. I read the Stranger Things book this past year, and it was awful.
I remember how disappointed you were with it.
It was so disappointing. And then I read a lead up to the Star Wars Episode 9. Was it Resistance Rising or something? And it wasn't bad. It was just kind of unnecessary, and so it kind of felt like a waste of time. Both of those books kind of fell into that way, except for Resistance Rising wasn't as boring as Stranger Things.
Yeah.
So after I do like a couple books that I don't care for, I usually fall back on a book that I already loved, and usually it's one of the Amber books. So
okay. So yeah, you almost have to read something that that you already liked again,
right?
Just to get that taste out of your mouth.
100%.
So it's funny. I haven't read a lot of bad books. It's almost like I tend to gravitate towards a book I already know. I'm not very adventurous with novels necessarily, which is why reviewing comics has been so good, because it's forced me to be very adventurous and read all sorts of stuff. But I remember for my wife, she's not a big reader, and I was trying to get her to read more novels, especially with us trying to write one for our series, which I'll talk about later, Visible Dreams. But we I got her this Marvel created this line, and it was a very short line of romance novels for some of their heroes, and there was a Rogue book and a She-Hulk book, and I was like, okay, well, I'll get the Rogue book. Wendy's favorite character's Rogue, and we'll do that. And I don't think she ever read it, and I did, and it sucked. It was like, and it was weird too. It was like she ends up falling in love with a dude who turns out to be an alien, and they have this long, like, Thelma and Louise-esque kind of road trip, and I don't remember a lot about it, but I think a lot of it's repressed at this point. But it was not great, and I remember being partway through him and Wendy just saying, well, why don't you put it down? I'm like, well, I gotta find out what happens. Like, I've already cut myself this much. I know I'm gonna survive. I might as well just do it. But that definitely shied me away from being adventurous with novels.
That's what happened to me at Stranger Things. I got to a point where I just wanted to get that stupid book done. Right. And I didn't want to just drop it. Like, I was like, what if something cool happens? But as you're getting to like the last 10 pages, like, nothing cool is going to happen here. I should
at that point, it's just like, so how does this train wreck happen? Like, how bad is it at the end? So yeah. As far as favorites, I am a sucker for fantasy. I love fantasy so much, and so J.R.R. Tolkien was a big one for me very early on, and another Terry Brooks. I've loved all of his stuff, and he actually had several. He had his Sword of Shannara series, which was really big for me, and then he had one that was in the present day, and it was called The Word and the Void, which, I know. But it was a really cool series, and I really loved that that sort of modern day take on magic. I thought it was really badass, and it really inspired me and excited me. Kyron says, a rogue romance book sounds like a bad idea. She can't touch or kiss anyone. I think that's actually why it's a good idea, because it instantly creates that tension. So, and him being an alien, I guess, I don't even remember, was he able to touch her, or I don't know, but I the romantic and sexual tension, it's now there just because of her mutant powers. So I think it could have been done well.
Kyron, you're thinking of porno. It'd make a terrible porno.
It would make a terrible porno. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I did get another question. What are some practices you use to overcome writer's block?
Yeah, so
you got it up there. Look at you.
You like that?
Dude, he's good.
Do that.
He is good.
So, writer's block. I mean, I think one thing that helps is when you're co-writing, you can obviously bounce things right off of your co-writer, or just turn it straight over to your co-writer. I mean, we've done that too.
Yeah.
Like, I got our characters into the middle of a situation and then handed it over to you for an episode. So, I don't know, you figure this out. So that helps. I think also just sometimes you need to walk away. Like, you can't just force yourself to write. Like, your best stuff never comes out when you're just forcing it.
Yeah. I also think that, because some people are like, well, I have to write, I really want to write every day. And I think sometimes it's not just about writing. Sometimes it's just about creating. So for some reason, writer's block doesn't necessarily exist. And it's just that what you really need to do is just get something out there.
Yeah, that's true too.
So maybe sometimes it's just, hey, why don't you just work on a different project? Like, instead of this one, why don't you work on something else? Why don't you write a short story? Why don't you just, write whatever? And sometimes you just got to get the lead out. You just got to, kind of get some of that crap out of your system so you can get back onto what you're working on. But also, sometimes it's just inspiration. Maybe it's time to not create right now. Maybe it's time to go and watch something that would excite you, or play something or whatever. It was funny. My daughter the other day came to me, and I'm kind of racking my brains about how I want to work on some more of episode or season 2. and even further on Essence House and what I want to work on. And she brought up this game, Life is Strange. And I don't, have you ever played that game?
I've heard of it. Actually, it might have been a PlayStation Network game that I might even actually have, but haven't played yet.
It's beautiful. And it's a time travel game as well. And it's just such a beautiful story. And it excited, honestly, because I've played the game before and I fell in love with the game, that as soon as I heard that name, it just that reinvigorated me. Mm-hmm. So, maybe there's certain things you can go back to. Listening to music can help me. I know that, like if when I was trying to run, which I'm not doing a lot of right now, but when I was jogging and whatnot, I would get punk music so that my feet would bang on the notes and I would actually end up moving a lot faster. So, you might want to find something, if you're writing some romantic fantasy or something, maybe something more lilting. If you've got this aggressive scene, maybe throw on some metal, just kind of play with it. I try not to put on anything too stimulating. Like I can't, I've tried to listen to business podcasts, like the business of writing while I'm writing. No, and even while I'm editing, I can't do that. I know you artists can. I hate you for it, but I can't do that when I'm writing. I just want to focus on that.
Even then, when I'm drawing or painting, I can't listen to a whole lot of things that I actually have to pay attention to. Like a lot of focus goes into what you're doing.
See, I love that you're doing that because I can't tell you how many of these artists piss me off because they're just like, oh yeah, I'll listen to your thing while I'm drawing, or I'll listen to this music, and I'm like, or I'll watch this show, and I'm like, you can do that? Like, I hate you so
Some
much.
people maybe can, but it's a lot of work to like.
Yeah.
Even like driving and stuff. Like I recently have been able to do audiobooks, but there was a time where I couldn't do audiobooks at all. Like I just couldn't focus on them because I'd be trying to do too many other things. So.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because Travis came in and he said, Chuck can run. And Kyron got it right. I can do beer runs. That's what I'm good at. I have started doing walks, though. And eventually I will run. And when I do, it won't be pretty. But I remember Travis getting in touch with me and saying that he would have Essence House on in the background. And then he realized he got to episode 3 and he's like, I don't even remember what the heck happened. And so he had to have it on while he was driving so that was his main focus. He wasn't worried about anything else. So he would sit there and he would listen. I love that you threw that up. He would sit there and he would listen to that. And then, that was his only real time to be able to do it. So, yeah, I respect that. Do we have anything else we want to talk about novels? Or do we want to head over to comics, our real bread and butter?
Yeah, I think real quick on videos. I do for a living I do video production, and it's similar to the audio stuff, but you do have it's along the lines of comics where you want to show not tell what's going on. So there's a lot more planning a scene and all that when it comes to video. We don't have to get too into that. Some of that actually transitions to comics, but there's a lot of considerations on length and things like that go into making a video.
Yeah. Do you ever find when you're writing, do you write for video a lot, or is it just you're going out there and just doing it?
No, I don't do a lot of the writing. Sometimes, we will work with scripts sometimes, but I don't really write a lot of the scripts. I do a lot of the filming and editing when it comes to the videos.
So when it comes to those scripts, are you finding are they giving you a lot of direction as far as camera angles and that kind of stuff, or is that kind of left up to you?
In my line of work, it's generally left up to me, but there is some of that, depending on what kind of video it is, I guess. A lot of them are more interview videos with B-roll. If you're filming a commercial, then it's very much plotted out. So it just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Comics. Do you know anything about that?
Not a few.
So how long have you been writing comics for?
I mean, since high school,
High school.
which was graduated in '95, so it's 25
So
years ago.
you've got a much wide, like for me, I wrote my first comic script in like 2007, threw it, on a shelf somewhere, and actually a buddy of mine had it, and then I didn't get back into it till about 2015, 16. So I don't necessarily have that wide range. What would you say is the difference between Eric, who was writing comics in the 1990s, and Eric, who's writing comics now? How has that process changed for you?
I think I still do. So kind of like we talked about earlier with our audio stuff, I plot out all like the main beats. So I know where things are going. I know all the important stuff that have to happen, and then I kind of break it down into from there. Like I'll have a sheet of paper, and I'll kind of plot out the big scenes, and I'll put like, this will be pages 1 through 3. This will be pages 4 through 7, and then from there I'll take it to writing out each page. It depends on what I'm doing, though. I think if I'm doing it for myself, I'm a lot looser. If I'm writing for like when we write for Greg for Dulce, we're fairly loose. We give him a lot of leeway with panels and stuff. We never tell him panel counts or any of that.
Yeah.
We just script it out as a scene. But like when I first would draw like comics back in the mid to late 90s, there was a rough idea, but it was a lot of making it up as I went along. Very much the Marvel method, I guess, but like a Marvel method where you aren't equipped to actually do the Marvel method. Like the Marvel method, it sounds easy, and but like really to do it and actually do it well is not easy, and I did not do it well.
Well, and I mean, I would also say I don't even want to write in that style in a lot of ways. And for me, that's nothing against anyone else, but you have to have such a trust and a knowledge of your artist and what they can do, and also and where they're good. But also, I find that puts a lot of the work on them. And it's like, you know what? These artists do a lot of work already, and then to make them have to, decide how everything looks. Like, I'm sure it's a lot. I would assume it's a lot. It can be nice to just look at a script and go, cool, I know what I have to do. Now, there's some times where
you want to be like, you want to also give them that creativity, like that room to play. And I think we definitely give Greg a lot of room to play. He's designing some characters on the fly. I guess I should mention that I'm talking about the Dulce book. And for that one.
He did the same with Belial too. Like there was a lot of it's funny, there was a lot of characters where I was just like, have fun, you know, and he created a lot of those demons just his own thing. And I said, because that's something he works very well with, and he had a blast. So know your artists and really let them do their own thing.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, I don't know, like when it comes to like a comic, I don't often do anything from anybody else's writing. I tackle that myself if I'm drawing. Generally, I'm not super interested in drawing somebody else's story.
Yeah,
I've done a little bit of it, but I do my best stuff when I work from my own.
So it's funny. This character right back here, actually, this is the caretaker. And the funny thing is, when I first wrote that character in 2007, he was just kind of like, even when the artist first drew him in 2016, 17, he had like an Emperor Palpatine kind of feel to him. And it was just there wasn't a lot to him. And I remember him saying, like, look, I can do whatever you want, but he's not very dynamic and exciting. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I really need to go into his background more. And so I did. And so you can really, if you take a look at him and really kind of see, there's kind of a lot more details and a lot more feel to him. And he feels like a much more unique original character. And that's because the artist was like, man, let's really play with this. And so I gave him an idea of what I wanted, and they really like took it and blew it up and turned it into something that's just badass. Like that gets a lot of people stop and look at that cover and then at that banner, just because my artist pushed me and said, no, we need to really bang this up. And so that's why you need to be open to your collaborators. You know, we were talking about it earlier with audio dramas, but your collaborators on a comic is your writers, your editors, you know, everyone else involved, and you got to be open to their input and to what they did. And if I wasn't, this honestly would be probably a flop, and you know, I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing, because people wouldn't be able to take me seriously as a writer if my editing, or as an editor, if my writing sucked. So
yeah, I just think it's like just the best way, like an actual collaboration, like hiring somebody to do a book, and then just, I don't know, I can't hire somebody to do something and then just micromanage them. And like, I like to give them some say.
Yeah.
I like to get that buy-in.
I really, and it's funny, yeah, because I mean, especially with you being the writer artist that you are, that makes perfect sense. For me, as the kind of sole creator, a lot of times I want to it's not about micromanaging. It's just like, I want to get all of the details that I absolutely have out there, and then the ones that I'm not so worried about, I just kind of leave those up in the air. I go, okay, go ahead. And I remember someone saying, hey, you didn't give them much to work with. And I said, no, I gave them an awful lot to work with because I didn't describe it. And they're like, well, what if they do something stupid? And I'm like, well, then I'll see it in the thumbnails and I'll say, that's dumb. Why are you doing that? But I haven't really had to deal with that too much, because most of the people I've worked with, you know, actually pretty much everyone I've worked with, they've worked with other people and I've seen them. So I've never really gone into anything blind with an artist. And so most of them have done stuff that I've really enjoyed and respected. And so I was already able to say, dude, I know what you're good at. Like, go have fun, do what you're doing. You know, guys like Greg Warrencheck, Sean Barber, I'm trying to remember all the artists I've worked with. Yeah, I mean, Nizamt was another one. But yeah, there's so many great people who have done just some amazing work. So that's cool. Kyron, are we good with that for now?
Yeah.
Kyron said, do you find the skills you use for your day jobs help you in creating comics and books?
I think for me, I work in a marketing environment, and so I'll get ideas often just from things that we do there. And I think I have access to, you know, equipment to do things a little bit better than I might if I was just working with, like, say, a phone or something. So those help. And yeah, we'll get sometimes we'll have like trainings or something from, you know, people, you know, might have somebody, we've had like a media training before where somebody came in from a local news in Chicago and like talked to us about like productions in general. And I think that I definitely like those type of things I grabbed little bits from, and they do help.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree. The funny thing is just like, when I started Welcome to the Void, the main character is a dishwasher. And the whole reason for that is that I spent most of my adulthood working in bars, and the absolute worst place you could be was in the dish pit. There was nothing more demeaning and unhappy to work in. And so in my mind, that already gave me something to work with just in that character and in what he was doing and in the place he was forced into. And so, yeah, I think good writers, they write from their experience, but then they also research. And so you kind of try to find that middle point where it's well researched and it feels like I've done it before, but then enough of myself is in there that it also rings true, and not like someone who's writing a secondhand experience, so to speak.
Yeah, I know. Like when I wrote Blister, it's very much based on things that have happened to me or things that happen to people that I know. And so it was very much writing what you know. But when it comes to Essence House, I think I've had to do a lot more research on things. Like the characters aren't necessarily me. There's definitely elements of both of us, and I think especially in Tim, but it has been a little more research heavy.
Yeah, especially and it was funny, especially as we moved on, I found that both of us ended up doing a lot of research. I remember for episode 3, I ended up doing a bunch of research on the 90s and stuff, and I really worked hard to really kind of sell that and what was happening there. So yeah, there's a lot of that, even with Belial, which is like an action comedy in hell. I was like, I need something to ground it, something to make me feel like I'm not just writing out of my ass. And so by giving him this shitty bar, I was able to kind of be like, okay, I'm right. I now have just that little piece of Chuck in there, and I have some little like heavy metal nods in there, just enough of that for people to go, okay, Chuck wrote this. This is definitely his thing. And then I got to kind of go nuts and write this hellscape and just have fun with it.
No.
Another cool thing we were asked was, how much evolution in your comic work do you allow for? Meaning how true to the original style, etc. But which, by the way, guys, awesome questions.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing questions.
I've had to consider this one a lot recently, actually. So, when I was a kid in high school, I created this set of characters with a friend, and my main character was Adhesive Man. I've done 3-issue series several years ago about him in a more professional way, and we did I think we did 4 or 5 issues of a big group book maybe 5 years ago now, and we just have a handful of additional stories from other things, and so we've been working this past year on collecting everything into one set. And I've had to consider that some of the earlier stuff, it doesn't go back to the high school stuff because that stuff's garbage. But there's stuff that, I drew in like 2007, and then there's stuff that I drew in like 2017. And there's quite a swing in how my abilities and my just my storytelling and everything. So one of the things that like kind of freaked me out about it was that it's a trade paperback we're putting together. So like my worst stuff is going to be right at the front. Like, so you pick it up on the shelf and it might be good stuff, but it's definitely the worst in the book. And so it's been something I've had to think about, because I wouldn't want to spin my wheels and do it the same for like over that course of time, like I want to always be doing my best work. I've had to think about that a little bit too with Blister. I think that I did my first Blister comic 3 years ago now. Yeah. So I'm working on my third one now. I started it, I don't know, towards the end of last year, and I'm just starting to pick it back up. But I think some of the art that I've done in it so far is better than the stuff that I did a couple of years ago, and I don't want it to be night and day, but I also don't want to just stay the same. I want to evolve. So I think it. I don't think it could work for like Marvel or something like that. Like if they're gonna change drastically, they can do it between arcs and stuff. But I don't know. I just think you should always be improving.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, obviously, as an artist, that's almost it's a lot more blatant. Like it's a lot easier to see that. As a writer, it's a little easier to go back and like tweak some stuff, and I mean, you can go back and just be like, man, I use ellipses a lot. I need to grow the hell up, or what's with all these semicolons? Seriously. So, I mean, it's a little easier for us to go back and be like, oh, no, I'm going to tighten this up and play with it. And and it's a lot more difficult necessarily for an artist without maybe having to completely tweak and tighten an entire story. But I think also like when you speak of the evolution, I think you also need to be really open to the evolution of the characters and to everything kind of growing and becoming bigger than it is. I like to talk about Simpsons a lot because I feel like they did so much right. I mean, they're around for 30 years for a reason. And when they first started, it was all about Bart, and Bart was the main character. But really, very quickly, they went, wait, Homer is actually the one everybody's really kind of gravitating to. And even then, they evolved their characters, and then they even went like, we need to move beyond this family. And had they not moved beyond that family and created really an entire city of characters, I think that show would have gone downhill a lot quicker and not lasted near as long. But having such a humongous cast and so many wild, wacky, zany characters, they were really able to play a lot with that. And so that's really important. I can't tell you how often, and I know that Eric and I have talked about this before, where people will be they'll be like, man, I got this great idea. It's going to be this Avengers style team. And they're going to be so awesome. There's going to be 1 million. We have an entire galaxy. And you're like, slow the hell down, dude. I get it. I understand your ideas are huge and you want to go really big with this. And I love and respect that. But give us just a little bit. Like, just start with that small foundation and build up. If you try to get all of that out, it's going to be watered down and crap.
If the first Marvel comic ever made was Infinity Gauntlet, it would have never worked.
Right? I mean, even if the first Marvel comic had been like the Avengers, it wouldn't have worked because those characters needed to kind of have their own background. And most of those characters were already doing other things before the Avengers really started. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal to really kind of get your feel. Now, that doesn't mean you can't start with a team, but, have a small team. That's why people have like a number, you see these numbers of like 5 in a team. There's a reason for that. There's the dynamics kind of work together, and having an odd number means that everything isn't going to be simple all the time. So you're going to have to play with stuff, and you're really going to have to kind of rotate who's working with who and who's in scenes together and all that kind of stuff. So, those things are done for a reason. It's not just because everybody loves 5. It's because there really is an intelligent design behind all of that. So again, start with your characters, allow them to be something, and also have a good idea of what they are in the back of your head. I remember a really cool writer, and actually I'll name him because he's just a great guy. Connor Bartel came to me, and he had this idea, and it was Swords and Sorrows, which is, if you ever get the chance to check that book out, it's really cool. I enjoyed it a lot. And it was like badass assassins, and it was this the assassin leader and his the mentor and the his student, and they get into this big fight and all that kind of stuff. And it's a one shot, and it's one and done. And when I read it, I said to him, I said, it's really good. I like the story. I said, but the characters, it's not there. They're not popping enough. And he said, well, yeah, but it's a one shot. I said, yes, but we still need to feel for those characters. We still need to care about them, and they need to still feel three-dimensional, even though they're only going to last so long. So I said, you don't have to write that stuff in there, but if you have a headcanon as to what those characters are like and their mannerisms, it's going to play out in the story much better. And he was very excited. We sat down and we kind of played with their world and all that. And it excited him so much that we're actually working on episodes 2 and 3 of that. He's making a graphic novel out of it. And it's just because he ended up falling in love with those characters. And that wouldn't have evolved into something bigger and better than what it was if we hadn't allowed that to be a part of it in the first place. So that's definitely something that I always adhere to and try to stress when I'm working with other clients or even in my own projects.
Yep.
What is this? Karen says, as an artist, sometimes it's good to have a detailed script, but sometimes it's good to have a bunch of leeway.
Yep.
I couldn't agree with that more. Do you have a preference? As I know you haven't necessarily worked with a lot of artists or writers, but like, let's say I were to write a script for you, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to kind of be, boxed in a little bit, or do you want like Marvel method?
I don't know. Like, I think that when I write for myself, I have an idea in my head of what is going on. So I guess I would probably like more of a lead on it, like telling me necessarily what you're looking for. Also, just that cuts down on time of, you don't want to draw something out and then have somebody say, "Oh, that's not what I was thinking," and then you're like, "Oh crap, I spent a lot of time on that." So
yeah.
So I guess it would be in that way. Or I'd probably just tell you, no, I'm not going to work with you because I don't want to draw somebody else's stuff.
Right. Well, then I'm just going to give that script to somebody else. I appreciate you letting me down early and live. I'm kidding. Phil Lockler says, what is it that fuels you to push harder and challenge yourself in your works? Ooh, I think for me, it's just always, and I tell people all the time, there's so many people who are talking about competition in comics. And I'm like, you're ridiculous. I don't like to tell people they're wrong, but it's dead wrong. First off, most of these people, if you take this seriously, you can end up working with them, like side by side with them. Why would you, like Eric I could have looked at and been like, oh no, I got to be better than this dude. I got to write better than him. But no, now I'm working with him, and that attitude never would have gotten me there. It wouldn't have opened those doors. So I think that's important. One of the things I like to tell people is, you're not in competition when you're working creatively. You're not in competition with other people. You're in competition with yourself. You need to be.
One of the things about competition to me too is that nobody knows who the hell you are. Like, no matter in indie comics,
yeah,
you could have 50, 100 issues of a series. But if you talk to somebody in a comic shop, they're going to be like, who? Chuck who? Eric who?
And even like bigwigs, and it's so funny. I was telling, we were talking about it recently because they were like, oh, all these big guys, and I'm like, do you know how many people have told me they work for Marvel? And I'm like, really? What'd you do? And it's not that I doubt them. It's just like, so many people have worked there. I'm interested. What did you work on? So even just your credentials doesn't mean that anyone's gonna know you at all. I mean, there's just so many, and that's true. Karen says everyone knows Eric. That's a true statement. Everyone does know Eric. Eric actually, I told him recently this. I said he intimidated the crap out of me, and not even on purpose. Cause he's not an intimidating guy, but I saw all of his stuff, and I was just like, dude, we were in a group together, Indie Comic Conspiracy, and he was always really fun and a great dude, and we got along. But I specifically did not add him as a friend for a while, just because I didn't want to come off as some kind of douche who's like trying to work his way up, And so finally he added me, and then a little while later he's like, hey, we're doing this little 4-pager. Do you want to edit it? And I'm like, you're damn right I do. Yes. And I realized how silly that was of me. I already had people on these pedestals, and they're self-made. Either you make them for other people or you make them for yourselves. But those things are non-existent. They really are.
I think besides the competition stuff, when it comes to pushing harder to challenge yourself, one thing for me, I mean, like when it comes to something like Blister, it's a very personal project for me. So I always want it to be the best that I can make it. And when it comes to things like working on Dulce with Gene or working on Essence House with you, it's just, you don't want to let down the person that you're working with. I mean, you want it to, it reflects on both of you. Like, I don't want you to write a bunch of crap. I don't want to write a bunch of crap for you. It's got to be.
It's like, sorry, Phil wrote, "Oh crap, I added Chuck as a friend. Do I unfriend? Too late now. You already pushed that button, dude. You screwed yourself." Aaron Poe also came in. What's up, dude? Good to see you. Really great guy. He's got a terrific podcast. He's got a bunch. Podcast from Below and Sci-Fi Sideshow, I think it is. Aaron, feel free to throw up your info. That'd be great. Yeah, man, you really just gotta you just gotta keep pushing and keep trying to be better than you were, and just love what you do. I remember so recently somebody got in touch with me, and they're doing this thing where we're doing one-page comics, and it's like amalgamations of all these already created characters. Like I got to work with Batman and Deadpool, and I got to write a one-page thing, and he said, I want 4 one-page scripts from you. It's about this subject. It's with Batman and Deadpool. It's about Batman asking Deadpool to work for Exposure to hunt down the Joker. And I'm like, okay. And, I could have just banged out because they weren't going to get published. They were just kind of for us to be able to show off and have some fun. But I thought, no, like this could literally be the one chance I ever get to write Deadpool or Batman. I want to take it seriously. And even in taking it seriously, I didn't. Like I had so much fun with it, but I really tried to, each one had a different flavor and a different feel. And I remember that I got to try to track it down too. One of the scripts I wrote was Deadpool as Lucy from Charlie Brown, and Batman is Charlie Brown coming in and asking for advice. And it was like, the assassin is in, and it was this funny little thing. And they didn't do it, but I just thought it would be hilarious to see those characters as Peanuts characters. I might still try to do something like that because it was so much fun. Yeah, it really was. I might just see if I can find somebody who can do that style and just do it for the hilarity of it. Because to me, it was a lot of fun, man. Do we have much more that we want to talk about as far as writing for comics?
I don't think so. I think we kind of went through. Yeah, we've gone through. So I guess that the last thing that we said we were going to talk about when it comes to switching between mediums is games. Yeah, you're right. So so my wife and I created back in 1999. We created an online role-playing game called Visible Dreams, and it's called a play-by-post game. And what the idea was is that we had a world set up, and we had different cities, and each city was its own message board. And so there would be different threads inside those message boards that had like one of them was for the tavern, one of them was for and we had all the main kind of locales and whatnot. We had the descriptions in there. And what you would do as a player is you would create a character that lived and breathed in that world. And then you would start by either creating your own thread or jumping into an existing one. And all you got to control in there was you. So we would call it fudging. And basically, if you wrote how someone else reacted, or how things were happening around you that you can't necessarily control, that was not okay. So you would basically come in, you'd say, hi, I'm or no, you wouldn't say hi, but you would say like, Eric the Knight walks into the Dusky Tavern. He looks around and takes in his surroundings, and Sting, the friendly bartender, steps up, puts his coin purse on the counter and asks for a drink. And then you would leave it at that. And maybe you would describe yourself more, and then the moderator would come in. They would play the NPCs, the non-player characters, and they would play those characters. And then maybe some other PCs, some other player characters would come in and want to interact with yours. And so it sounds like at the very beginning, you're like, is that all that fun? But once it kind of blows up and you find yourself in multiple threads and multiple storylines, really playing, like when it starts out, it's slow. But when it's going,
we used to have these things called posting sprees, and it would be like a couple of us in a thread together, sitting down and just going back and forth. And you would be on, at that time it was MSN Messenger, and we would just be like, I'm trying to see that. Oh, Eric is the bomb. That's a true story.
Thanks, Jerry.
And then you would just you would go back and forth. So I'd write something out and I'd be like, post it, and then the next person would jump in, post it, and that would be like our whole conversation. And we're writing back and forth, and it was so much fun. So that was something. We did that for 10 years. We had fans all across all across the world, to be honest. We had people come in, and actually, I'm going to show you guys something real quick. Wendy, my wife, she was the co-creator of it, and that went for so long. We had so much going on that when I said to her, "Hey, do you want to write something? Like, do you want to get into comics?" And she was like, "Well, I've never written for comics, but I want to write again." So, and we had tried writing a Visible Dreams novel. So she wrote a Visible Dreams script, a mini series for comics. And so for her Christmas present this year, I got her this, and this is this is an alternate cover that I did, that I had made by one Avery Ferdinand. He did the pencils, the colors. He's normally known as a colorist, but he's amazing. And he did that whole thing. And so I gave that to her, and I said, "Look, I know how important a cover is to someone to be able to do their own. So please just treat this as a variant." But it's my way of giving you some art. For comics, one of the most important steps early on is that first time you get a piece of finished art.
Yeah.
Like when it's done, it feels so good.
Yeah, like I drew comics from, I don't know. I mean, I was drawing comics when I was like 7, but like in a more serious way in high school. It was fine, but it was like once, 2007-ish or whatever, when I finally like got like one like professionally printed, and it was like next level, and
yeah,
it's just an amazing feeling.
And honestly, it doesn't even matter if it sucks. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah, in hindsight, that's not even that great, but
you're right. But you did it. Like I mean, it's done. And
you get that feeling to a certain extent with new things as you go on.
Yeah, especially as you grow as an artist and as a writer and whatnot, you really get to kind of feel that and just be prouder every time you kind of feel like you've upped your game and you've continued, even as a story moves on and you move on to issue 2 and 3 and upwards, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Phil said, "Sounds like a great impromptu way to get out of your wheelhouse of writing. Nice idea." Yeah, and I mean, it's not even a style of gameplay that we created. It's one that it's actually where Wendy and I met in '99. We met on one of those games, and we became very close. She came up to stay with me for a bit, and we just fell in love, and we created our own game from that. And we love that style and that idea. I know that I've seen people who write for like video games and stuff, and those scripts are so tough, especially when there's like multiple choices and whatnot. The script looks like a damn graph. Because there's all these pieces of like you do this and then that and that can come from it, and you really have to that's where the outline becomes so important, because you can't just bang that out. You really need to know where this is going and what different things are going to affect. And actually this isn't something we got to talk about so far, but when you're writing comics and even anything else, the size of your story, like how you're selling it, matters too. Whether you're writing a short story, an anthology piece, a novella, a novel, and then with comics, if you're writing a one shot, a mini series, an ongoing series, a graphic novel, like all those matter so much. Do you find yourself do you really have to get in your own head and decide like, how am I going to do this before you really start working on something?
I mean, generally I work in single issue formats when I can. I think I had to plot out when I wrote my blister book. I had to plot it out. It was actually a collection of 8 short stories, but there was kind of one overarching thing going on throughout across the board. So so I had to definitely like plot that out. But I mean, it wasn't really choosing a format at that point. It was gonna be a book. But yeah, generally I've worked all in floppies. I've had a couple 2-parters.
Yeah. I remember getting a comic from someone, and obviously this one I won't name names, and it was well written. But when I got it, the ending was it was suddenly done. Like I was like, did I not get the whole book digitally? Like what happened? So a lot of times when I'm doing Chuck's Raw reviews, I might get in touch with the person, especially because most of the people I tend to already know and have a respect for. And this person I did. And so I said, hey, do you mind if we talk on the phone? And they're like, okay. And so I called them and I said, what's up with this? It just ended. And he goes, well, it's because it's a graphic novel. And I said, no, it's not. He said, what do you mean? I'm like, you just gave me 1 issue. And he said, yeah, but it's going to be a graphic novel. I was like, no, it's not. It's not a graphic novel until it's a graphic novel. So you need to know your platform and how you're selling it. Because the thing is, if I get this 1 issue where the ending doesn't make me want to keep reading and it doesn't kind of keep pushing forward, it's like, what even just happened there? Why am I doing this? And that's a big deal. So you need to understand that you're going to be writing differently if you're writing a graphic novel. If I'm writing a graphic novel, my first 20 pages or 24 pages or whatever, they don't need to have a solid ending. They just need to keep dragging people along to the definite conclusion that I'm going to have at the end of that graphic novel, whether it's 60, 100, or more pages. But if you give that to me in pieces, the ends of those pieces need to make me want to pick up the next one.
Yep.
And that's so important to understand that, because if you don't, then who's going to even buy the second one? You know?
Yeah, we have that same with even with the audio drama with Essence House. Like we need to give people that ending that they're going to hate because they have to wait another 2 weeks to see what happens next. And we've really pushed that on each other very much. I would say pretty much every episode. I think there was, I don't even know if there really was one, but for the most part, all of them really make you have to go like, crap, yeah, what's next? Like this is definitely continuing to move on. And as we've discussed it, so, with something like Essence House, you can't, you don't know how long it's going to go, but we also don't want to leave people hanging. So Eric and I, one of those things is where we have the idea for the end of season 2, and we effectively have like 2 ideas. And the idea is to either give it a soft ending that allows us to move on to episode 3 and continue it, or to have a really hard ending and have it go, okay, cool, this is its own thing. And if we want to pick it up and play more in that world, we still have that option, but at least the readers won't feel like, or the listeners won't feel like they were somehow duped and didn't get everything they wanted. When this novel comes out, I want somebody to be able to pick it up and read it from start to finish and have a complete product. I don't want them to get to the end and be like, oh crap, I gotta wait till they finish another 2 seasons and put out another book. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's really important. So even knowing what you're working on is so important when you're writing. You need to have that in your mind. I've had people say, oh, I'm writing this thing, and I'm like, do you want to edit? And I go, okay, well, what is it? Miniseries, blah, blah. And they're like, well, I'm not sure yet. And I'm like, well, then you're not even ready to write the script. Like, well, the script's done. And I'm like, well, but you don't even know what you have yet. How can you do that? So sometimes you then have to read over the script and go, okay, well, this is the feel I get towards it. I think that you should either embrace that, or if there's something else you want to do, we need to tweak it. So yeah. Was there any other mediums? I'm Never got into film, sadly, so I don't know a lot about that. But a lot of that is you can research that. And I don't know about you, but for me, I learned how to write comic scripts just by reading other comic scripts, and I assume that works with a lot of other scripts as well. Though with film,
Right.
there's a very definite way of doing it.
Yeah, and like I've written film scripts before, and I just found a script online and used the formatting that was there. So yeah, that generally works across the board when it comes to that sort of thing. Even comic scripting, I did the same when I actually sat down and wrote an official script at one point. Finally, then when it comes to the audio books and the books themselves, it's just sitting down and writing. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, and I've heard this 1,000 times, but it's true. Do not stop and edit. Just keep going. Get it done. Make it the biggest, most steaming pile of crap you've ever done, and it doesn't matter because you finished it, and then you can go back. But if you keep working on it and not getting past that certain point, it's not going to get finished. And finishing is the most important part.
You know what helps too, I think, is when you're writing like a book, it's always nice to record yourself reading it out loud, or just read it out loud. And like there's parts where especially when you hear it back, you'll be like, well, I used that word really close to the same word. Like that sounds a little bit funny. That's honestly, it's happened. There's been a few times during Essence House when we've gotten back an episode and I'm like, I wish I had rearranged that sentence, but it's done now. So when it comes to the book time, when I'm reading back through it and we're ready to make it a book, there'll probably be some things that we'll actually rewrite, I think.
Yeah. Ben, it was sweet. Ben said, Chuck's game made me a writer. Actually, that's untrue. You were always a writer. We just gave you a place to flourish and grow. So I was really glad to watch you work on there and then work with you extensively since then. He actually recently sent me a comic script that was really solid. We worked over it, and we're working on that right now. And he also has a novel that he's been working on for the better part of 10 years, and it's really coming together. I'm really excited for that. And he has made so much. I've seen that thing break down and become something different so many times. And you're really going to see some cool stuff from him. So keep an eye out for Ben Cook. He's got some great stuff happening. He also did ask a good question. He said, have you guys done any adaptations, comic to novel, or vice versa, story to audio, etc.? You have definitely done that.
Yeah. So with my Blister stuff, I wrote the novel first. Well, it's a novella, I guess. It's a little shy of a novel. But
how many words is it?
I don't even remember offhand. It's probably the equivalent of like 3 of our episodes.
Oh, okay.
It's not. It's about 120-page book or something, 130-page book maybe. But I wrote it as 8 short stories, and I've been converting them to comic issues since. So definitely doing that with Blister.
And I again haven't read the novel, but the comics, it was almost hard for me to believe that they had been a novel first, because they just felt they felt like that was the way they were always written. And I feel like that's the mark of someone who really knows what they're doing and really can make it happen, where you read it and you go, yeah, it was always a comic. And then you go, well, no, it wasn't. And I think that's the same with anything. I watched Lock and Key, and I watched the show before reading the book, and I loved the show. I had such a blast with it, and it really felt like its own thing, and I didn't feel like, it felt like it was always like this. And now I'm going back and I'm reading the graphic novel, and it also has its own feel, and it does things in its own way. And I feel like that really is kind of the way to do it, is that you embrace that. Lock and Key is a great show. I was very happy with it. but you really have to embrace that that medium, and just understand that this isn't necessarily going to be the same thing. You don't want to lock yourself into anything. I hate when, and the people will do it all the time. They'll be like, oh, I didn't like this Marvel movie because it's not like the book.
Yeah.
I read the fucking comic. Like, I already read it. I
Yeah.
don't want it word for word. Some of them they've done word for word, like the Watchmen adaptation, except for that ending, it was pretty much like,
Yeah.
you know, obviously they had taken some things out, like we didn't have the alien, we didn't have the pirate stuff, which if you don't know anything about Watchmen, that's hilarious. Like, how do you have aliens and pirates? But they had certain segments that they took out, but the stuff that they did almost felt like a word for word love story to it.
Have you watched the full cut of it with where the pirate stuff's all added in?
No, so I own it. I haven't watched that cut yet.
It doesn't really flow great. It works better as a comic than it does as a movie.
And I think that's probably why it didn't end up there.
The movie was a good one.
Yes, and I love that ending to the movie, and I felt like our modern day audience would, and especially a movie going audience, would embrace that more than had they suddenly had this weird alien thing come in.
That's one of the things too. So a lot of people will talk about like a movie as if it's got advantages over a comic, but they're just different mediums. You can get crazy weird in a comic book. You can't do that in a movie, and it works really great in a comic book. Look at when they adapt superheroes from a comic to a movie, like the costume changes they have to make it feel like it fits in the real world. You can't have a lot of those costumes like as just straight up as a movie. So like there's just a lot of little things that are bonuses for comics that they do over movies. So when I see some of that stuff, recently I saw a post about comparing a comic adaptation or comic to a movie adaptation, and it like made it sound as if the movie adaptation was like the definitive good thing, and what did the comic do right? And like, no, the comic was around for 20-something years, and it had so much more in it, and it was so much wilder, and blew me away so much more than the movie that was still good. It just wasn't better because it was a movie.
Yeah, and it has to be its own thing. Joss Whedon, one of the cool things he did was he ended up adapting. He did a season 8 of Buffy, but he did it in comic series. I think it was for Dark Horse.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked him right away, like, did you feel like this was any different? You know, like, is it how you would have written the TV show? And he said, no, not at all. He said, I don't have a budget in comics. Like, my budget is my artist is this much a page, and that's regardless of whether he draws stick figures or he draws all of the galaxies, you know, like all of the planets in the Milky Way. Like, no matter what I do, it's the same. So I can go as big as I want. And he said, I got to play with so much crazy stuff in season 8 of Buffy that I never would have been able to do in the TV show, because there's a budget involved, and there's, you know, CGI and all this stuff that you can't do in TV, or that is incredibly bloody expensive in TV, that you can do easily in comics. You know, as long as you have the right artist and you pick the person for it, you know, they would often complain about, like, I remember season 1 of my gosh, Game of Thrones. They were like, yeah, we can only do one huge battle per season because they're so expensive. And the books, it's like, we can do that whenever we want. Like, I'll just throw a big battle here because I want a damn big battle, you know? And so, you know, you really gotta understand and embrace your medium. And I think that should be a massive takeaway for people, is you need to take that medium, embrace it, and go, what can I do with this that I can't do with any of the other ones? What do I really get to play with?
If you're going to make a comic book, make a comic book that's supposed to be a comic book. Don't make a comic book because you can't afford to make a movie. And if your initial reason for making the comic book is because you can't afford to make the movie, go bigger with the comic book. Like, embrace that still. It's not a consolation. It's just a different medium.
Yeah. And that's always very frustrating. I tell people all the time, I say, because they'll be like, I write comics so that I can write movies. I'm like, go write a movie.
Yeah.
Like, write a script. People get excited about this stuff. There's ways to make things happen, or you can write a script and get it in the right hands, and people can get excited and want to make it. Obviously that's difficult, but wouldn't it be better for you to be true to yourself and true to what you love and your actual vision than to go in and do a comic because it's a lot easier? It's not. And it's going to come off. I've read things where I'm like, you wanted to make a movie. Well, yeah, but this isn't a movie. It's not the same. It comes off as stills, like you can feel it. And
I picked around Blister for about a decade, with my intention for it to be like a webcomic, like I mentioned earlier. And I finally wrote it because I thought, like, I don't have time to draw this thing. I just want to write it. But when I went to do that, I didn't just write it to get it out there. I invested a lot of time into figuring out how to write it, and I wrote it in a different way than I would have made the comic. The comic's got some wilder stuff, like some of the daydreaming and stuff.
Absolutely. Real quick, Phil was great. He said, great information and discussion here today. Thank you all for taking the time. Thank you, Phil, for coming out. We really appreciate you being here and checking it out. We love that. Honestly, we just did this and we thought this would be something really nice for people to be able to see and hopefully learn from, and for us to be able to have a good time. And you guys came out, so we really appreciate that. Thank you. Kyron then came in. He said, yeah, writers say go big. Artists say, damn it, how am I going to draw 1,000 starships and still hit this deadline? LOL. That actually speaks to the idea of know who you're writing for as far as your artist is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to write 1,000 awesome, like some big epic, like one of the Crisis, or like an Infinite Crisis or something like that, I'm not necessarily going to get one of these guys who does, single issue characters. You're going to want someone like a George Perez, who he seems to thrive somehow in having 50,000 characters on a page. It's right. What he loves to do. So somebody who writes, who draws more intimate, smaller panels and emotional stuff, that's not necessarily the guy you want to be drawing your 1,000 starships.
And you just need to talk to your artist. Like I love working with Greg Warrenchak, and he's nailed it on Dulce. It's completely filled with weird stuff, and he kills it every time. I asked him at one point to do something else, and he wasn't fully comfortable with it. He said, if I told him I could look at finding somebody else to do it, and said, if you don't find anybody in a month, talk to me again or something. But he wasn't really into it, and it's a good, honest conversation to have.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I'm working on J.R. Harris. I'm working with him. I'm editing a book for him, and he loves that star stuff. So he loves all the science fiction and everything. And so as I see the work that he does, what Orion Zulu wrote in his script and what he put in there, he blew it up, and he adds all these extra details. And so it's almost like he gets so excited by it that he has to make it even bigger than what we asked for. And some people, they thrive more on the intimate. So again, like Eric said, you just got to feel them out. You got to get the right artist and the right writer and the right project too. Greg was perfect for Dulce and for Belial, because he loves working with the weird. Mm. He loves playing with the weird, and holy crap, is he an amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
Like, I find that I already know what my characters are going to say, even when I don't remember the script, because I see his panels and I'm like, yeah, the story's right there. Like, you could have just given me this, and then I could have written the panels that like the letter bubbles.
Yep, it's terrific.
Did you have anything else, any other mediums or anything else that you wanted to talk about before we decide to go?
No. I would like to mention Essence House again, because we're on the channel right now. I think I mean, if you're into science fiction, time travel type stories, family drama, it's not heavy in time travel and science fiction. I mean, it's definitely elements of it, but it's very much about a family and inheritance and figuring out the weird. We're both definitely influenced by the show Lost and things along that nature. So right now we have 7 episodes public. You can catch it on iTunes or Google Play or Podchaser, like a billion different places. So it's out there to check out. There's over 2 hours of content available.
Yeah. And Eric, so people like Essence House, I have no doubt about that. But if they want to track you down and they want to check out some of your books, where can they find you?
EricCockrell.com. It's pretty simple. It's I got all my comics on there and my book. That's pretty much the best place to go.
You make me feel like a massive douche because every time I'm on a podcast, they'll ask me that question, and I'm like, all right, you can find me on Twitter at Chucky Pin. You can find me on Facebook, Chuck Pineau, because I got to spell it because they're not going to remember it. You can find my YouTube channel, Chuck's Raw Reviews, and you can find my comics at Bonfire Press. And I have to go through all that stuff. You see how quickly I spouted it out because I've said it 1,000 times when it was just so much easier to say ericjcockrell.com.
I come from the marketing world, so you have one clear call to action, ericcockrell.com. Boom.
Oh, it's brilliant. Oh, guys, you can tell I'm way too creative and I am not on the marketing enough. Thank you, everyone. Aaron came on. He said, looking forward to episode 8. Dude, you're going to love it. I do not believe for a second it will disappoint. Kyron, deciding to one-up him, and as a patron, said, I can't wait for episode 9. And, dude, I can say the same thing to you. Episode 9 will not disappoint. Man, Eric really brought it out on that one. They're both absolutely amazing episodes, and they're really blasting towards the season finale, of which I want hate mail. Yeah. I want, for the first time ever, I want you guys to come to me and say, what the fuck? I have to wait 2 months for this crap. I hate you. I want that. I expect it. I almost demand it. So that's definitely what we're writing for. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for coming out. Do you have any final words, homie?
No, just thanks everybody for checking us out. Thank you, Chuck, for doing this with me.
Oh, dude. On it at this point, any chance just to hang out with you?
We can do this all day long.
Yeah. No. Love it. We don't just work together. We're buds too. Everyone, thank you so much for watching us. We really appreciate it. Your questions were awesome. You guys are awesome. If there's anything else you want from us, if you have any questions, Kyron, you should hate me already. If you guys have any questions, or if there's anything that you guys want to see out of us or even future panels or whatnot, let us know. We would love to help you out. Peace, love, and comics.
Bye.